In this video, I'll be turning this drawing into a realistic Charizard. Right, so let's get started. So I'm gonna use this epic outline of Charizard as the base image. And I'm planning to use this image of a lizard, or is it a bearded dragon? Whatever it may be, I'll be using this for the body texture of Charizard. I mean, if this texture doesn't work, I'll probably find an even better one soon enough. So I'm gonna use the pen tool here to make a selection of the leg and maybe fill it with this orange color. Looks pretty nice. Let's see if I like it when I add this texture on top and change it to overlay. Oh, that looks pretty good as well. And maybe add another texture, because that's pretty much what I'll be doing throughout this video. 2 words for you, trial and error. Well, maybe that was 3. But anywho, I'm gonna add a hue saturation adjustment layer here. Then tweak the values a little bit. Yep, that's pretty decent. And now I'm gonna do the same thing over here with this leg. And you know what, it's the same thing for the rest of the body as well.
A few moments later.
And now it's time for the wings, at least the outer frame, the frame of the wing. Does this part of the wing have a name? The exoskeleton? Probably not, but anyway, let's repeat the same process. Now over on this side as well. And now it's time for the tail, which if you have ever seen Charizard would know is made up of 2 sections, so I'll keep that in mind. But for now, I'll just leave the tail like that. Just laying out the foundation here, so we are good. And now to trace the arms with the pen tool, and obviously more repetition. And now for the head, and as you may have guessed by now, more and more of the same thing. And now I'm gonna outline the eye, fill it with white, and maybe add a blue iris. And moving on, I'm gonna fill the wings with maybe this blue, cyan, turquoise. I'm just gonna call it blue, which is much easier to say. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. And now I'm gonna do the same thing for the belly and the rest of the tail, because they will be of the same color, which is this color. Don't really know what to call it. I guess I'm now done with the base colors. And now for adding the textures and the daunting task of making it realistic. So here we go. For the texture of the belly, I'm gonna be using this image of a crocodile. Crocodiles, dinosaurs, and dragons, they seem to be very closely related to one another for some reason. Anyway, I'll do some warping. That looks pretty good. And another image for the other side. That looks good for now. And now for the tail, just about the same thing with the same texture. A few more tweaking and this looks good. And now for the rest of the tail, I'm gonna use this new texture. Maybe change it to luminosity. This is surprisingly very fitting for dragon skin. Remember when I said, if this texture doesn't work, I'll probably find an even better one soon enough? Yeah, I guess this calls for some retexturing. But I'm gonna finish the tail for now and maybe come back and change the texture of the legs and the neck later on. That looks very nice for the tail. And now the same thing for the arms, also using the same texture. Alright, that looks very good. And now we're gonna add some texture to the wings. And for that I'll be using this image, then change its blend mode to luminosity, and then kinda repeat the same process from before. And there we go. And then fill this whole area using the same texture, and obviously more warping. And now the same thing for the wing on the right. And there we have it. And guess what? Time for more textures. At this point I'm pretty sure you're tired of textures, so don't worry, time for some fast forward.
Later.
And we are done with the wings. And so we shall do the same process for the hands as well. Okay then, time to move on to some more important things such as the head. And here I'm gonna do something different. Nah, I'm just kidding. I use the same texture once again.
Later.
And now I'm gonna fill in some of the empty regions, cause obviously. And now it's time to add the claws and teeth. And for that I'll make these shapes with the pen tool. And fill in those shapes using this color. And then maybe use this image for adding texture to these shapes. Okay, that actually looks pretty nice. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing for the rest. And now moving on to the head once again. Use this eye perhaps. Not really sure if this would work, but let's see. Oh, that's pretty impressive. Didn't really expect that, but it looks good. And now to do the teeth, I'm gonna repeat the same process that I used for the claws. Alright then. And now let's create the mouth, which should be easy if I paint in some black color over here. Alright, not gonna lie, that was also not that hard to do. Time to clean up the image just a bit, get rid of some of these unnecessary parts, and there we go. Something looks off. You know what, let me add a background to this. That should definitely help. Okay, this looks unfinished. I guess this would be a good time to acknowledge the fact that this texture over here on the legs and the neck, yeah, that ain't working. Yup, I was wrong. So it's time for some retexturing. And for that, I'm gonna bring this over here, get rid of that. Oh, see, this looks good. And it obviously matches the head as well. So this should be easy from here onwards. So cue the music and let's fast forward.
One eternity later.
This looks so much better now. So now that we're done with the textures, finally, so let's give it some life by adding shadows and highlights. But before that, we gotta make the environment a bit darker. So I'll do that here. And maybe add a bit of lava around Charizard. To give a shout out to the Charizard vs Magmar battle. Probably one of the best ones I have seen. So we gotta pay some respect. And I'm gonna make this darker as well. And maybe add some lava around where Charizard is standing. This doesn't have to be perfect or anything, I guess. Okay, looking good so far. And maybe select the sky, replace it with another one. Oh nice, that's very nice. Then I'll go ahead and make the environment a bit more darker. Definitely not gonna be the last time I do that. And okay, that looks just about the environment that we need, and time for the shadows and highlights. But before that, let me clean up a bit more. Get rid of that, shape that up a bit, get rid of that, and add a bit of texture over here. And now we're good. Now finally, let's add some shadows and highlights. So I'm gonna start off by adding some shadows under the head on the right, and a bit of shadows under the arms, and a bit of shadows over here. But you know what, this is gonna take a while, so cue the music. Okay, this is starting to look very nice. But we are not done. So let me clean up these claws a bit more. And add more shadows on them as well. And let's continue to add more shadows because that seems to be working quite nicely. And now it's time to add some shadows on the ground underneath Charizard. There we go. And moving on to the head, maybe make this eye a bit smaller. Alright, very nice. And then clean up this region just a bit. And now I'll add some shadows within the eye. Gonna go all the way around. Alright, that actually looks pretty realistic. And then I'm gonna add some shadows over here under this structure thingy. It's a horn, right? And then more shadows around the eye region. Alright. Next, it's time to add a flame at the tip of the tail. So I'll do that using this image. It seems like I have to adjust it a bit. And then maybe change its color. And a bit more warping, and there we go. And now let me try adding some light on top of it and maybe behind it as well. Alright then, so let's see what other changes I can make. His belly actually looks a bit weird. I guess if I try erasing this part and maybe blend these textures together, that seems to work. Guess I'll do that all the way around, and perfect. And now I feel like I gotta change the perspective of the belly. And now add a bit of this over here. Erase a bit of it from here. And maybe repeat the process, and that looks pretty nice. And I'm gonna add a bit of this texture over here to add some depth for the legs. And now the same thing for the other leg as well. And a bit more shadows. Alright, I think that should do it. And now I'll add a nostril because Charizard has one. I mean two, but only one's visible here. But anyway, moving on. I'm gonna give it some depth as well by adding these things around the nostril, which surprisingly wasn't that easy. So now this got me thinking, maybe I should add these things around the eyes as well. I guess it wouldn't hurt. Alright, that actually gave it a bit more depth. I like it. The teeth looks pretty plain now. Guess you know what happens next, right? And now do the same thing for the claws as well. Alright, very nice. And I'm gonna try maybe add this texture over here. Yep, that definitely helps 100%. Let's do that on the other side as well. Okay, I like it. And I guess the time has finally arrived to enhance the environment. So let's do that. That looks very nice. I'm actually pretty happy with that. But of course, let's add a bit more shadows and highlights. And finally, I did a bit more adjustments and some color grading in camera raw filter. And this is the final Charizard.